Tell us a tale of the old days, begged Sam. A tale about the elves, before the fading time. I would dearly like to hear more about elves. The dark seems to press round so close. I will tell you the tale of Tenuviel, said Strider. In brief, for it is a long tale of which the end is not known, and there are none now except Elrond that remember it aright as it was told of old. It is a fair tale, though it is sad, as are all the tales of Middle-earth, and yet it may lift your hearts. It tells of the meeting of Beren, son of Barahir, and Luthien Tenuviel. Beren was a mortal man, but Luthien was the daughter of Thingol, a king of elves upon Middle-earth when the world was young, and she was the fairest maiden that has ever been among all the children of this world.
Hey, Tolkieneers, I'm Danny J.
And I'm Joel N.
And this is Trevor D.
And we are...
Keep on Tolkien.
Keen.
Keen?
Yeah, Keen.
Yeah, buddies. How you guys doing today?
Hopefully this finds you well.
We've got a exciting episode for y'all today.
Yes.
This
has been asked for by a few of you, actually.
Yeah, this is...
over the years.
I think this was originally a listener suggestion, and it's kind of been in the works for a while. We were just kind of daunted at the undertaking.
Yeah,
but
I forget who it was. I feel bad now.
Yeah, there's there is a lot of information in this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Our episode today, we're talking about episode 84, and this is going to be First Age references in the stories The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, the whole book trilogy.
Yeah, the OGs, as it were.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Now you might understand what we mean by daunting taking on the task.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pages to go through.
Yeah, so just briefly, what do we mean when we say references to the First Age? We're talking about any references to people, places, or events of the First Age that are made within the story of The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books.
Yeah.
So this does not include the foreword or the prologue or the appendices of any of the books. This is strictly
within the narrative.
within the narrative.
I imagine if those were included, it would be a lot more.
Oh,
It would be
God.
a lot
Yeah,
more.
the appendix alone is just... Oh.
Need like an itemized list.
And
Yeah.
also, just another disclaimer, like, we are certainly not claiming that these are all the references.
These are all the ones we could find.
These are all the ones that we could find in the amount of time we had to devote to this subject. So, the way we kind of did is we broke it down by, like, keywords, by subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
But first, we're going to start off with a little bit about the First Age.
Yeah, so what actually is the First Stage, in case you're wondering, right?
Yeah, we're talking about First Stage references. What is it?
So the First Stage, funnily enough, is not the first stage of time that was measured in Middle-earth.
Wait, really? How much time happened before the First Age?
Actually, Trevor, it's the third time period recorded in Middle-earth.
It's it's true, yeah. It's kind of strange.
That's pretty weird. All right.
Yeah, after Middle-earth created, it entered the years of the Valar, which is roughly 3,500 years of the sun, like the standard years.
Mm-hmm. And next came Years of the Trees, and that lasted about 1,500 years. And then we finally get to the First Age, quote unquote, the First Age of Middle-earth.
So you're saying there was about 5,000 years that happened before the First Age?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Were all the years like the same length of time?
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, we really have no idea how long years were in the days before the First Stage.
Right, like, for example, the Valyrian years, they say it was roughly like 3,500, 3,500 years. But what is, quote unquote, a year before the sun existed, right? A Valyrian year could really be like thousands of years of what we know of,
yes.
like years of the sun.
So I was incorrect earlier. So that 3,500 years, that's 3,500 Valen years.
Yeah, Valyrian years.
So we have really no idea how long.
No
that
idea.
was.
How, that was a crazy amount of indeterminate time, yeah.
But could we also assume that maybe those years were shorter than a regular year?
Maybe. I guess you could
Could
say
go either way.
I guess it
I
could
mean,
go
I
either way.
guess,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. I guess we just don't know. You're right. So it could go either way.
Okay,
That's the fun point, I guess.
I heard you had mentioned just earlier years of the sun. Like is that
Right.
is it like real life, like 365 days?
Yes, it's actually exactly the same, 365.25 days.
Yeah, we looked it up and they even included leap years.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And yeah, there's 4 seasons, 6 by the reckoning of the elves.
That's right.
I like the real life consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So all right, then tell me what defines the start of the first age.
That's kind of actually. I'm glad you asked that question, Trevor.
Good
'cause
job.
we have this whole outline about this. So it's actually kind of debated when the first stage actually starts. Some people recognize it as the first rising of the moon. That's like the first vessel of light that entered the sky, really. And this is also when Fingolfin finished crossing the Helcarax and entered Middle-earth. This is also technically when the second spring of Arda begins.
Right.
So a lot of people tend to think that. But
yeah.
I feel like most people recognize it as the rising of the sun, right?
That's what I always thought,
That's what I always thought, too.
traditionally.
That
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, that sounds like it makes sense since we defined years of the sun.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like that's
It's
a good
kinda like
baseline.
new age. Yeah. Many also recognize it as the first rising of the sun, but that's also when Fingolfin's host enters Mithrim,
Mhm.
and the race of men awaken Hildorian, which is a good reason why the first age should start there, right?
Because that's when the second born, the children of Iluvatar, the final children of Iluvatar wake up,
Yeah.
enter the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, when we start measuring by years of the sun. So that seems to make sense. Yeah, that's always what I thought. Like, I feel like that's what a lot of people really thought.
Yeah.
But it turns out, while we were looking into this for this episode, the purpose of this episode, we just wanted to be able to give a definition. It turns out there's actually some more information in the History of Middle-earth, Volume 10, Morgoth's Ring. It actually states in there that the first age technically begins when the elves are created, when they first wake up in Years of the Trees 1050. So technically there's actually an overlap between Years of the Trees and the first age. There's like a 450-year overlap.
Yeah.
Which that blew my mind. I always imagined years, like ages being, strictly separate things.
Mm-hmm. But I guess, I guess it's just a different way to measure ages, I guess.
That kind of sounds like it might give a little more substance to how long the years must have been, though. Because like if we have the 450-year overlap, and we know that like the first and second age and stuff are measured by like the 365 bit, that kind of sounds like it would make sense that the years are the Valian years, right?
Well, we're talking about Years of the Trees at this point, not Valiant years.
Yeah.
Oh, and the Valian years were just the years of the Valar.
Correct.
I see.
Yeah.
I see that separation now.
Yep.
But I feel like after looking into that and kind of soaking in that fact, it kind of makes sense that the first age would begin with the awakening of the elves. The first age is kind of like the age of the elves.
Yeah, and I always figured that the ages 1, 2, and 3 were by the reckoning of the elves, right? That's what I always figured. Like the histories
I
are
suppose that's
kind of
true.
recorded by the elves.
Yeah. Record keepers and all that
Yeah.
would make sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So yeah, we learned something new, and that is that the first age technically starts in the Years of the Trees, 1050.
There you go.
The more you know.
The first age is frequently just referred to as the Elder Days. It was a rich time in Tolkien's early work. It was a period of great prominence of the elves, in fact.
Yeah, and the free peoples of Middle-earth prospered in the country known as Beleriand during the years of the first age. And unfortunately, the later years became a time period of intense darkness and lots of tragedy and war.
It was pretty shitty.
It was pretty shitty. So it started off great and it ended really, really bad. The first age was a roller coaster.
It really was, yeah. It really was.
And I know because you guys got me these books, right? And the first age includes the three famous early tales: the Baron Luthien, the Children of Húrin, and the Fall of Gondolin.
That's
Yes,
right.
Those are known as the 3 chief tales of the Elder Days.
Yeah, you've got the fairy tale love story, Baron and Luthien, and then you've got like the ultimate tragedy,
Yeah.
and then you've got the Fall of Gondolin, which is kind of dark, but it's kind of more like
inspiring.
it's kind of inspiring. Yeah, it's more inspiring.
Yeah.
Well, and as the opening excerpt states, no, like all tales in Middle Earth are sad.
Right.
They're sad.
Straight up.
Yeah. So, but these, like Trevor said, these 3 tales, those are the big ones, and they're often referred to as, quote, the 3 great tales of the first age.
Right.
And I think you can actually buy all 3 of them in their independent book forms as a set now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what you guys got for me.
we got
actually.
for
Oh,
Trevor. Yeah,
That's fucking right.
that's why.
Speak
Yeah.
of the devil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's awesome. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, that was a welcome to the podcast gift for Trevor.
Yeah, we highly recommend you guys check that out. If you haven't checked out the novel versions of all three of those, it's worth it.
Yeah. So let's get into some references. Why?
Well, yeah. Why do you guys think there are so many references to the First Age throughout The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings?
So the events of the First Age were essentially the first stories of Middle-earth, the fictional Middle-earth that Tolkien had ever written.
Oh, so he didn't start with The Hobbit.
No.
No, actually in 1914, Tolkien began working on stories that would become the Silmarillion.
And then 23 years later, in 1937, encouraged by his success with The Hobbit, Tolkien submitted to his publisher, George Allen and Unwin, a more developed version of the Silmarillion that he called the Quenta Silmarillion.
Yeah, but they rejected it, saying it was obscure and too Celtic, quote.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Celtic.
Yeah. And Edward Crankshaw, the dude that they got to read this book, in my opinion, he was super fucking racist. He immediately said it was Celtic art in that Anglo-Saxons found it perplexing.
That's a pretty close-minded way to think.
Yeah, at best he was a close-minded fuck, right?
Yeah, and with a name like Crankshaw, he just kind of sounds like an ass.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Crankshaw.
My name is Edward Crankshaw. Thank you. That's Mr. Crankshaw to you.
That's
Mr. Crankshaw.
Instead, George Allen and Unwin asked Tolkien to write a sequel to The Hobbit.
Yeah, Tolkien began essentially to revise what we know as the Silmarillion to kind of be a sequel, but soon he just kind of turned to making a whole new independent sequel, which became The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And we've got an excerpt here, a relatively long excerpt. We're actually going to split it between Trevor and Danny. And this is from the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, letter number 19.
Yeah, and this is kind of a response to that rejection letter.
Yeah, this was Tolkien's response to that rejection letter when he was trying to get the Silmarillion published.
So the part that I'm going to read is setting up the letter, and then Trevor is going to read the letter that Tolkien wrote. So here we go, guys. Tolkien lunched with Unwin in London on 15th of November and told him about a number of his writings which had already existed in manuscript. The series of Father Christmas letters which he had addressed to his children each Christmas since 1920, various short tales and poems, and the Silmarillion. Following this meeting, he handed to Allen and Unwin the Quenta Silmarillion, a prose formulation of the latter book, together with the long unfinished poem, The Jest of Beren and Luthien. These were shown to one of the firm's outside readers, Edward Crankshaw, who reported unfavorably on the poem, but praised the prose narrative for its brevity and dignity, though he said he disliked its eye-splitting Celtic names. His report continued, "It has something of that mad, bright-eyed beauty that perplexes all Anglo-Saxons in the face of Celtic art." These comments were passed on to Tolkien.
My chief joy comes from learning that the Silmarillion is not rejected with scorn. I have suffered a sense of fear and bereavement, quite ridiculous, since I let this private and beloved nonsense come out. And I think if it had seemed to you to be nonsense, I should have felt really crushed. I do not mind about the verse form, which, in spite of certain virtuous passages, has grave defects, for it is only for me the rough material. But I shall certainly now hope one day to be able to, or to be able to afford, to publish the Silmarillion. Your reader's comment affords me delight. I'm sorry the name split his eyes. Personally, I believe, and here believe I am a good judge, they are good, and a large part of the effect. They are coherent and consistent and made upon two related linguistic formulae, so that they achieve a reality not fully achieved, to my feeling, by other name inventors, say Swift or Dunsey. Needless to say, they are not Celtic. Neither are the tales. I do know Celtic things, many in their original languages, Irish and Welsh, and feel for them a certain distaste, largely for their fundamental unreason. They are in fact mad, as your reader says, but I don't believe I am. Still, I am very grateful for his words, and particularly encouraged that the style is good for the purpose, and even gets over the nomenclature.
That's so fucking funny. What a class act, though. I would have really told those guys to go fuck themselves, especially with the Celtic shit.
Right, yeah.
Like, you dumb... I would have been like, you dumb motherfucker.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You don't even know what you're talking about. This isn't even Celtic. I know what Celtic shit is in the original language, and I don't even like it. So fuck off, is basically what he said. But in a real classy, kind of polite type of way.
Yeah, I love it. So, although a major work in itself, The Lord of the Rings was only the last movement of a much older set of narratives that Tolkien had worked on since 1917, encompassing the Silmarillion in a process he describes as mythopia, mythopoeia, mythopoeia,
That is a crazy fun word.
or myth making.
Or
I'll just say
myth-making.
that.
Yeah. I think it's Mythopia,
Mythopia?
I believe.
Okay, the extra O throws me off.
Yeah, it's from Greek, I think.
Mythopoeia.
Originally, Tolkien planned to write a story in which Bilbo had used up all his treasure and was looking for another adventure to gain more.
That seems kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, it could have worked. You never know.
I suppose.
Yeah, but eventually Tolkien decided that the magic ring from the original Hobbit and its powers would be a better focus for the next work. And as the story progressed, he began to bring in elements from the Silmarillion mythology naturally. I mean, he already had so much of it written, and we all know that he loved it, and he already wanted and tried to get it published. Like, it was...
So much lore there.
There was so much good lore, and he just used that as the backbone to build The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, which is super sick. And The Hobbit as
And
well.
The Hobbit as well, yeah. The Hobbit, even though that came first and The Lord of the Rings has more Silmarillion inspiration, there certainly is a lot in The Hobbit.
Yeah,
still.
it's there's a surprising amount of first stage references in The Hobbit that I didn't really necessarily pick up on.
Yeah.
It's really cool that he kind of had this sort of backbone to work off of. Like, he planned a whole history out and then's like, all right, guys, I've got the world. Let's tell some stories.
Right.
Exactly. I got the world and the languages. Let's go. Yeah.
Well, one of the things we've talked about in the past, and one of the many reasons people love Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings especially, is just because his writing style, the way he references ancient events, just like their history.
Well, it's cool that
Yeah.
you can even go back and read about these events in other books.
And now these are all real events because he just decided to reference a bunch of shit he had already written. So
Yeah.
it's like,
It's fucking brilliant.
it was brilliant. It was fantastic. Amazing for readers because you get to read the amazing Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, and then you're like, man, I wish that all that shit was real. And then you're like, oh, wait, all that shit, history shit is real. We can go read all those stories for real.
Yeah.
It
Now,
really-
now we can, but originally you couldn't.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk a little
We'll talk about that
a little
later.
more.
It really fleshes out the world regardless. Like,
But-
if you're hungering for more, you can get more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get right into The Hobbit.
Yeah, on that note, let's jump right into these references. So we're going to start off with The Hobbit, and like we mentioned earlier, we kind of broke this down by keywords or subjects that we could find reference. If we went through like all these books, The Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, chronologically and listed every single time, that would be...
It would be difficult for us.
There'd be a lot of references in writing, and it'd be a lot. We thought it'd be easier to condense it down this way.
Yeah. So let's our first keyword, one of the great first age tales, right? Gondolin.
Gondolin, yeah. So Gondolin actually comes up in The Hobbit 6 separate times, like explicitly.
Yep. 3 times in chapter 3, A Short Rest.
Yeah, so in this chapter, this happens in the Third Age, 2941. This is when Thorin and company come upon the troll horde in the Trollshaws in Eriador. This is, I think, on their way to Rivendell, right?
Correct.
And this is when Thorin, Gandalf, and Bilbo arm themselves with 3 strange blades that they found in the horde.
They seem to be very old, but in excellent condition. And we've got an excerpt from Roast Mutton about the trolls, read by Joel.
There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I'm afraid they belonged to victims. And among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. 2 caught their eyes, particularly because of their beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have only made a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was as good as a short sword for a hobbit. These look like good blades, said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. They were not made by any troll, nor by any smith among men in these parts and days. But when we can read the ruins on them, we shall know more about them.
I think it's pretty cool that they they end up taking the blades to Elrond in Rivendell,
Yeah.
and to figure out what they are, and he inspects them and names the blades from Gondolin in the First Age.
Yeah, I think he, because he is also a descendant of Tuor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he could have been just like, give me those back.
Oh, he could have claimed
Yeah,
them as his
those
own.
are mine.
Yeah, well, the 2 of the blades he names, one of them is Glamdring, and the other one is Orcrist. And we have an excerpt about this part from Chapter 3, A Short Rest, read by Danny.
Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. That day he looked at the swords that they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, "These are not troll make. They are old swords, very old, of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's horde or goblin plunder, for goblins and dragons destroyed that city long ago. This, Thorin, the rune's name, Orcrist, the goblin cleaver, in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, foehammer that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well."
Hell yeah, direct references to Gondolin, the Gondolin blades.
Yeah, dude.
Even references the fall of Gondolin with the dragons and the orcs.
Yep. It is also mentioned one time in chapter 4, Overhill and Underhill.
Yeah, so this is the chapter where Thorin and company are sleeping in a cave in the passes of the Misty Mountains, and they're captured by goblins at night and brought to Goblin Town.
Down to Goblin Town.
Down to Goblin Town. And the Great Goblin becomes enraged when he sees the Gondolin blade that Thorin is carrying. And we've got an excerpt here from The Hobbit, Chapter 4, Overhill and Underhill. Read by Trevor.
The great goblin gave a truly awful howl of rage when he looked at it, and all his soldiers gnashed their teeth, clashed their shields, and stamped. They knew the sword at once. It had killed hundreds of goblins in its time, when the fair elves of Gondolin hunted them in the hills or did battle before their walls. They had called it Orcrist, goblin cleaver, but the goblins called it simply biter. They hated it and hated worse anyone who carried it. "Murderers and elf friends!" the great goblin shouted. "Slash them! Beat them! Bite them! Gnash them! Take them away to dark holes full of snakes and never let them see light again!" He was in such a rage that he jumped off his seat and himself rushed at Thorin with his mouth open.
Seeing red.
Yeah, dude. He's not happy when he sees that blade.
He goes right into like a blood rage, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, straight berserk.
Yeah.
So Gondolin also comes up in Chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. This is when it comes up essentially when Bilbo draws his blade when he first finds Gollum in Gollum's cave.
Yeah, Gollum asks at one point Bilbo what he has in his hand, and he replies that it is a sword that came from Gondolin.
Yeah, and Gollum essentially hates Sting for the rest of his life after that because of this interaction.
Yeah. Just a short little exchange like that. What do you got in your hand? Blade from Gondolin,
Blade from
motherfucker.
Gondolin. Yeah.
Stay back.
Nice little name drop. And this is a children's book, and he's still doing these first stage references. It's great. It's great.
Yeah. Certain things don't come up that you think might come up in The Hobbit. Like, for instance, Eldamar, the kingdom of the elves in Valinor, right? That's mentioned 0 times explicitly. However, in Chapter 8, Flies and Spiders, Eldamar is referenced under a different name, Fairy.
So Eldamar, I haven't heard this really before today. Is this a person, as a place? You said it was a kingdom of elves?
Yeah, it's the kingdom of elves that live in Valinor with the Valar.
Yeah, this is not something I ever really thought was going to like pop up in The Hobbit when we started this review.
It's one of those surprising little
But
things.
we stumbled across this one, and I was like, oh my god, this is straight up talking about like Valinor and fucking Eldamar and shit. Like,
yeah.
And Eldamar's not named after an elf, right?
No,
I think it means elven home in
okay.
Quenya, if I remember right.
I like that.
So essentially in this chapter, the narrator begins to describe the wood elves that Bilbo and the dwarves have just come across in Mirkwood. And the narrator goes on to describe the difference between these wood elves and high elves of the West.
Yeah. And we've got the excerpt for you from Chapter 8, Flies and Spiders. Joel's going to read it.
The feasting people were wood elves, of course. They differed from the high elves of the West and were more dangerous and less wise. For most of them, together with their scattered relations in the hills and mountains, were descended from the ancient tribes that never went to ferry in the West. There the light elves and the deep elves and the sea elves went and lived for ages and grew fairer and wiser and more learned, and invented their magic and their cunning craft in the making of beautiful and marvelous things, before some came back into the wide world.
I like that this excerpt describes different elf types, like light elves, deep elves, sea elves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard those specific types of elves, like because I knew we had like the elves of the woodlands and stuff. But
Yeah, he's basically naming. So the light elves would be the Vanyar,
Yep,
right?
the
The deep
Vanyar.
elves are the Noldor,
Mhm.
and the sea elves would be the Teleri.
Yeah, it's funny because these are all like just kind of offhanded. He calls it fairy, and he says, sea elves.
He's talking
and-
about the same shit.
Well, he's talking about the same shit. Yeah, he
Yeah.
dropped the 3 different elf houses from Valinor, the
Yeah.
Noldor, the Teleri, and the Vanyar, and he's talking
Noldor
about
even means deep
Eldamar.
elf, I believe.
Yeah, it's crazy. This was just a reference that I've had forgotten about, and definitely surprised me when we stumbled across it in The Hobbit.
Yeah. Weird, guys. See,
Crazy shit.
these little things, man. Yeah, in the same chapter, Flies and Spiders, the narrator briefly describes the origin and animosity between elves and dwarves, summarizing the story of the friggin' Nauglamir, you guys.
Another surprise story that we didn't expect to find in The Hobbit, but we just found it after this reread.
It kind of
So-
comes up.
Yeah, so we've got an excerpt here from Chapter 8, Flies and Spiders, read by Danny.
So to the cave they dragged Thorin, not too gently, for they did not love dwarves, and thought he was an enemy. In ancient days they had wars with some of the dwarves, whom they accused of stealing their treasure. It is only fair to say that the dwarves gave a different account, and said it was that they only took what was their due, for the elf king had bargained with them to shape his raw gold and silver, and had afterwards refused to give them their pay. If the elf king had a weakness, it was for treasure, especially for silver and white gems. And though his hoard was rich, he was ever eager for more, since he had not yet had as great a treasure as other elf lords of old. His people neither mined nor worked metals or jewels, nor did they bother much with trade or with tilling the earth. All this was well known to every dwarf, though. Thorin's family had nothing to do with the old quarrel which I have spoken of.
Yeah, so this is just, again, talking about some events of the First Age, the story of the Nauglamir and King Thingol and the dwarves, and the death of King Thingol.
Yeah.
I remember in the Hobbit movie, they played it off as if this was some weird exchange between, like, the dwarven king of Erebor and Thranduil.
Yeah.
At some point, with just, like, some random gems and
some
shit like that.
nonsense, yeah.
Some nonsense. No, this was referencing some solid First Age lore.
Yeah.
The story of the Nauglamir.
The Nauglamir.
Very cool reference in The Hobbit.
Yeah. We also have some other tie-ins that weren't quite like references, but the thing being there is a reference in itself.
Right,
So,
yeah. For example,
we have the Eagles of Manwë.
yeah, the Eagles are featured prominently in The Hobbit, and they rescue Thorin and company from the wolves and goblins in the chapter Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire. And we've got a excerpt here about this scene, Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire, read by Trevor.
Eagles are not kindly birds. Some are cowardly and cruel. But the ancient race of the northern mountains were the greatest of all birds. They were proud and strong and noble-hearted. They did not love goblins or fear them. When they took any notice of them at all, which was seldom, for they do not eat such creatures, they swooped on them and drove them shrieking back to their caves, and stopped whatever wickedness they were doing. The goblins hated the eagles and feared them, but could not reach their lofty seats or drive them from the mountains. Tonight, the Lord of the Eagles was filled with curiosity to know what was afoot, so he summoned many other eagles to him. And they flew away from the mountains, and slowly circling ever round and round, they came down, 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 toward the ring of the wolves and the meeting place of the goblins.
Yeah. The Eagles actually go so far as to get involved in the Battle of the Five Armies as well.
Yeah, and this shows that it was important enough for the Eagles to be getting involved. The Battle of the Five Armies was a big deal.
Yeah, they typically don't involve themselves in things unless they're very important.
Yeah, that was their policy back in the First Age too. They didn't involve themselves in very much.
Yeah.
I'm curious, being that these are eagles of Manwë, would you say that some of these eagles probably lived for a very long time?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's not mentioned in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, but the eagle who is the father of the Lord of Eagles is Thorondor, who is the in the First Age.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an old eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them were created before the First Age.
Yeah.
Essentially back when Manwë was wanting some of his own homies to watch over the skies.
Yeah. That's what he wanted. Because, Aule had his dwarves. Yavanna had her Ents. He wanted his eagles.
Wanted his eagles, so we got some eagles. I still think the dwarves are pretty fucking awesome, though, but, whatever.
Yeah. Let's talk about a little bit about the Lord of the Eagles, Gwahir.
Yeah, Gwahir. So it's mentioned in the Lord of the Rings books that he is the son of Thorondor, the Lord of Eagles in the First Age.
Yeah.
Thorondor has a lot to do with some of the tales in the First Age.
Yeah, because he lived right. He lived right by Gondolin, so yeah.
Another character from The Hobbit whose existence is more or less a reference to the First Age, Elrond himself.
Of course,
He's a relic of the First Age.
Elrond the Relic.
he is. Yeah, straight up. Thorin and company stay in the House of Elrond, the last homely house east of the sea, in the chapter A Short Rest.
Yeah, Elrond just being in the story, that's a tie-in in itself to the First Age. He was born in the year 532 of the First Age, back in the havens of Sirion.
Yeah, he and his twin brother Elros were the sons of Eärendil and Elwing. And we got that excerpt from The Hobbit, A Short Rest, where we describe Elrond.
He was as noble and as fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, and as wise as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it.
I love that narration.
Yeah, it's like no story ever ends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love The Hobbit. It's a children's book. He has some fun little sass in the narrative.
Yeah, I like it.
But yeah, if it ever gets to it, let's take his note. Let's actually end The Hobbit references there.
Yeah. That's more than we thought we would find, but all we could find.
All we could find. There may be more. If
There may be more.
if you know of any more,
Hit us up.
hit us up. Give us a comment.
Yeah.
Let us know if you know of any more First Age references in The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, throw it up on Discord. We could even discuss it.
Yeah, we could. We very well could. But let's move on to the meat and potatoes here. The Lord of the Rings, the big boy.
Yeah, this is the good one. This is the big one.
Yeah, so let's first get into some things that you'd think would come up, but don't.
Yeah, straight up. Like, for example, the War of Wrath, the thing that ended the First Age, the thing that ended the Elder Days. Didn't come up at all.
Nope.
Not that we could find at all.
Zero mentions.
At least not explicitly anywhere.
The term First Age mentioned 0 times.
Yeah, they seem to prefer the term Elder Days instead of First Age.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but that's
Yeah.
also pretty strange. Like,
Yeah, they don't even clarify.
Really weird.
They don't use the term First Age at all. And then also the Anya Lindley, the story of creation. That seems like something that might, I don't know.
You'd think that might come up, but it doesn't.
Not explicitly.
However, some parts of the Anya Lindley are referenced in The Lord of the Rings, such as Gandalf's speech in The Two Towers, where he describes the creation of Middle-earth and the role of the Valar and Maiar in shaping it.
Yeah, so there's some vague references to creation, but
never by name.
we never really talk about the Anya Lindley.
seems weird that he would even bring it up but not mention it by name.
Gandalf says some pretty crazy shit.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
He just drops knowledge sometimes, and you can't stop it.
You just can't.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the references in The Lord of the Rings. And again, there are many. This is not all of them,
Yes, but it's all we could find.
but it is all that we could find in our allotted time. So if you guys know of any more that we missed, let us know. Hit us up.
Let us know, yeah.
So we started off with, like we mentioned earlier, we did kind of by subject, by keyword, rather than going through the stories chronologically and touching on every single little one. So we're going to start off by talking about the Elder Days. How many times are the Elder Days talked about throughout the Lord of the Rings? And we found out that the Elder Days came up 16 times throughout the narrative of the Lord of the Rings, all 3 books.
Yeah, one instance is one time at the in the chapter at the sign of the prancing pony from the Fellowship of the Ring. Elder Days are mentioned when the narrator discusses the men of Bree.
Yeah, Tolkien explains that the men of Bree were the original inhabitants of the Bree area, and they were descendants of the first men to travel westward from Hildorian, where men originated.
Yeah, some of those dudes we learned about in the last episode.
Yeah, there's like a great migration, a sundering, if you will.
Yeah.
And he says that the Númenóreans returned, the narrator says that later, when the Númenóreans returned to Middle-earth, they were surprised to find the Bree men still there.
It seems like they've been around for a while, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we've got a fun excerpt about this from chapter 9 at the sign of the prancing pony from the Fellowship of the Ring.
According to their own tales, they were the original inhabitants, and were descendants of the first men that ever wandered into the west of the middle world. Few had survived the turmoils of the elder days, But when the kings returned again over the great sea, they had found the Bree men still there, and they were still there now, when the memory of the old kings had faded into the grass.
Those people, they last.
Yeah, I feel like if nothing else says the true hardiness of men, that this is one of them, like the Breelanders.
Yeah, they weren't even high men. They were just middlemen. And
Yep.
they last. So another good reference to the elder days that we found, it was in chapter 11, A Knife in the Dark. The hobbits are discussing the elder days to distract themselves from the imposing darkness, and this is when Aragorn tells them about the tale of Tenuvial.
Yeah.
And we actually read that tale for you guys in the opening excerpt.
Yeah, if you recall.
If you recall, it's lovely. That was one of my favorite first stage references in The Lord of the Rings, when Aragorn would like sing songs or tell them the tale of Beren and Luthien.
Yeah, super cool.
Very cool.
It's also cool, like, I feel like there's several of these things throughout the books where like something of the past is mentioned, but then never talked about again.
That's true. Yeah, it's one of those things that he references, historical references that he just drops in there. It just, I don't know what, it's like adding, a little extra spice, a little extra flavor.
A little bit of first stage references.
Makes things tasty.
I wonder if he has like one of those cool grinders that grinds up.
like a pepper grinder?
Yeah, the fresh ground first stage references.
You need some fresh ground first stage references?
Yeah.
More?
Thanks,
You tell me
Tolkien.
when.
You kept things spicy for us.
Kept things fresh, too. The Elder Days is mentioned again in a song in the chapter Many Meetings. It's a song that that Frodo hears Bilbo chant.
Yeah, while they're hanging out in Rivendell.
In Rivendell, yeah.
It's mentioned 3 times at the Council of Elrond, where Elrond is recanting his memories of the Elder Days.
Yes.
Yeah, the the Council of Elrond, everything comes up, right?
Yeah, and we got an excerpt for something else that covers this later.
Yeah. We'll hear a little bit about
We'll hear
this
about
later.
his
We just
memories.
didn't want to
Yeah.
repeat some of these.
Yeah, because some of them mention
times.
more than one thing.
Right,
So,
and we want to get to as many subjects as we can, as many references. So the next one that we found for referencing the Elder Days, there is one reference in The Ring Goes South. That's Book 2, Chapter 3.
Yeah, the Elder Days is mentioned when Elrond states that the Fellowship must be few in number, because the strength of arms or numbers doesn't mean jack shit against Mordor.
That's right. He even says that even if he himself had a host of, quote, a host of elves in armor of the Elder Days, end quote, he says it would be to no avail against Mordor. So essentially, force is not an option. That's not a strategy.
Yeah, we got to go stealth.
Yeah, I mean, those elves were badasses.
Yeah, that was like the height.
Elves of the Elder Days, they used to kill Balrogs and shit.
Yeah.
They had like
They-
flaming eyes and shit.
All
Yeah.
kinds of crazy stuff. They were powerful.
Yeah, wild as shit. Elder Days is mentioned 3 times in A Journey in the Dark when we're stuck in Moria. That's chapter 4.
Yeah, so this is when Gandalf explains that the text written on the doors of Durin are, quote, in the elven tongue of the west of Middle-earth, in the Elder Days. Another name drop. He also mentions that, quote, the elven smiths helped from the Elder Days, and then also its Elder Days are mentioned again when Gimli sings for them the Song of Durin, which I love.
Yes.
But we have sung the song for Durin for you in the past, so we won't do it again here.
No. Even though we
it's a
want
good
to.
one.
We
It's a
want
good
to.
one.
It's a good one.
We want to.
It's a long one.
Also in the Fellowship of the Ring, chapter 6, Lothlorien. Lothlorien is compared to the Elder Days twice.
And then also chapter 7, the Mirror of Galadriel. Galadriel references Khazad Dûm back in the Elder Days while greeting Gimli.
And then in Book 3, moving on to there, in Chapter 2, The Riders of Rohan, Aragorn compares the Fangorn Forest to the mighty woods of the Elder Days.
Yeah, in the 2 towers
The
there.
Wild Woods. And then in the chapter The White Rider, Gandalf says, quote, a thing is about to happen, which has not happened since the Elder Days. The Ents are going to wake up and find that they are strong.
Hell yeah.
And that was one of those lines they pretty much scripted and put right into the movie.
Yep.
I love that one.
I really like how that paints like the trees, like, because I mean a tree trunk is a very sturdy, hardy thing, and so like having the Ents wake up and find that they're strong, like that'd be a crazy, awesome awakening to have.
Yeah, man. That they're a force to be contended with.
A forest to be contended with. That's what I heard. I like it. I'm sorry.
Good one. Good one. All right, let's shut it off for the night, guys.
That's it. Thanks for tuning in.
Tip your waitress. let's get into the next one. It's
we got more.
Yeah, we got more coming, baby.
Here's a good one, though.
Elder Days is also referenced in the Two Towers on the Window on the West. When Faramir discusses the Rohirrim with Frodo and Sam, the Elder Days comes up. And we got a excerpt from that chapter by Trevor here.
These are the Rohirrim, as we name them, master of horses, and we ceded to them the fields of Calenardhan that are since called Rohan. And they became our allies, and have ever proved true to us, aiding us at need and guarding our northern marches and the gap of Rohan. Of our lore and manners they have learned what they would, and their lords speak our speech at need. Yet for the most part they hold by the ways of their own fathers and to their own memories, and they speak among themselves their own north tongue. And we love them. Tall men and fair women, valiant, both alike, golden-haired, bright-eyed, and strong. They remind us of the youth of men, as they were in the elder days.
I always love that excerpt. Just the camaraderie.
Yeah, just like, these are our homies for life. Like, you know,
we love them. And they remind us of
our ancestors.
Of our ancestors back in the day when they were strong and pure.
Yeah. And that was like the
blonde-haired and blue-eyed and superior.
Oh no, that took a turn for the worse. Because we know that they're from the last episode that they are descendants of the lesser group or the greater group.
Yeah, the greater group of the northern men.
Yeah, and that splintered off, so they're the House of Hador, essentially.
The golden hairs.
Yeah.
And again, it's nice to see them like keeping that strength throughout the ages.
Yeah.
And
dude.
I mean, the House of Hador and the Rohirrim, they are known for being just big, stocky, fit, blonde-haired people. Like
hardy
very
folks.
hardy folk.
Let's get into another keyword here. Luthien. One of the greatest heroes of the First Age, right?
Right. So naturally, the tale of Beren and Luthien, that's one of the most famous tales from the First Age.
Oh, yeah.
So naturally, Luthien comes up a lot in The Lord of the Rings. We found her name to come up 14 times throughout the story.
14 times?
14
times. Now, keep in mind, like, for example, in one of these instances, her name comes up 7 times just because this is
referenced
it's
over
song.
and over and over again.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Like, if characters were having a conversation or something, like, you'd reiterate what you're saying over.
Yeah, so, like, in The Fellowship of the Ring, A Knife in the Dark, the hobbits, they discuss the elder days to distract themselves from the darkness, and this is when Aragorn tells them the tale of Tinuviel. We actually mentioned this earlier before.
Yeah, Aragorn even does them a kind of a favor, and he ties in the tale of Beren and Luthien with their very own story that they're living out right now, man. And we got a excerpt here read by Joel from A Knife in the Dark.
There live still those of whom Luthien was the foremother, and it is said that her line shall never fail. Elrond of Rivendell is of that kin, for of Beren and Luthien was born Dior, Thingol's heir, and of him Elwing the White, whom Eärendil had wedded, he that sailed his ship out of the mists of the world into the seas of heaven with the Silmaril upon his brow, and of Eärendil came the kings of Númenor, that is, Westernesse.
So I always thought it was pretty cool that Aragorn is related to Elrond.
Yeah, technically.
Because Elrond, like, is basically the father figure for a while, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he raised Aragorn for the most part, yeah.
And he is technically like his great. He's a great
He's his uncle.
He's an uncle. I don't know how many greats there is, but it's
many
a lot.
Generations.
Many.
Yeah.
Many.
Yeah, but funnily enough, Aragorn doesn't mention that, like what you said, is that he is also a descendant of Beren and Luthien.
That seems kind of weird. It's telling a story about his family, and he's not even like saying
He's
anything.
like, there are some alive who are descendants of them. He doesn't mention like
this guy, right
this
here.
guy who's got 2 thumbs and is Luthien's descendant. This guy.
Yeah, he even carries the Ring of Bear here.
Yeah, well, he didn't have it at this point in the book. Remember?
Oh,
he gave it to Galadriel, or not Galadriel.
That's right. I keep forgetting that in the
Arwen.
book he gave it to Arwen for a while. Yeah,
it's not a thing. It's wild to think about, but it wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't wearing the ring at the time of the War of the Ring.
All right, so let's jump into another Luthien reference. We've got Chapter 12, Flight to the Ford from The Fellowship of the Ring. So after Frodo has his original confrontation with the Nazgul, where he's wounded, they have to make their way to Rivendell, and, things kind of come to a big climax at the fords, and at this point, Frodo has to ride alone over the fords of Beranen just to get over to Rivendell safely and get away from those Nazgul.
Yeah, when Frodo crosses the river, it looks like he is totally fucked.
Toast.
The Nazgul are hot on his trail, so he has no choice but to turn around and face them. He draws his sword and he shouts.
And here's what he says from Chapter 12, Flight to the Ford, read by Danny.
By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, said Frodo with a last effort, lifting up his sword. You shall have neither the ring nor me.
Yeah, he throws out straight up a reference to Luthien the Fair and then Elbereth, the Vala of the Stars. He's trying to draw as much positive power in his corner of the ring as he can because he's about to fucking faint.
Yeah. We also have it mentioned in the chapter Mini Meetings, which is the first chapter of the second part of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, this is when Frodo essentially the chapter where Frodo wakes up in Rivendell, you know.
Where we come back online.
Where we come back online. So at the house of Elrond, just prior to the Council of Elrond, this is when Frodo sees Arwen, the daughter of Elrond, for the first time. And she is one of the ones who is, it's basically described that she is the likeness of Luthien, again.
Yeah, and we got an excerpt here by Trevor from the chapter Mini Meetings, Fellowship of the Ring.
So it was that Frodo saw her whom few mortals had yet seen, Arwen, daughter of Elrond, in whom it was said that the likeness of Luthien had come on earth again, and she was called Undomiel, for she was the even star of her people.
Arwen Even Star.
Even Star.
So
Beautiful.
I just kind of like connected these dots, but so Aragorn being of the line of Luthien, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Falling in love with somebody who looks like Luthien.
Correct.
Well, actually is also related to
Also of the line of Luthien.
Also of the line of Luthien.
Is this incest?
This is cousin fucking.
Technically is cousin fucking.
This is technically,
we don't like to mention it because it's so many generations removed.
It's very removed.
It's like maybe far enough away it's not, but it's sort of borderline.
But I mean, it's technically...
Yeah.
There's some blood related
They
there.
are technically
is.
like
There
cousins,
is, yeah.
but to I don't know what degree. So I guess you could describe it as one more instance of cousin fucking.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just made
Gotta
that
ruin,
connection.
Gotta ruin Aragorn for everybody.
Wow, thanks, Trevor. Soiled it.
Oh, man. Elrond also discusses his lineage to in relation to Luthien at the Council of Elrond in the Fellowship of the Ring. We got an excerpt from Joel.
But my memory reaches back even to the elder days. Eorendil was my sire, whom was born in Gondolin before its fall, and my mother was Elwing, daughter of Dior, son of Luthien of Doriath. I have seen 3 ages in the west of the world, and many defeats, and many fruitless victories.
Yes, indeed.
You seen a lot of sad shit?
I like his description, just saying fruitless victories. Like, not every win is a win.
Is a true dub.
Well, I mean, from his perspective, he's one of the Noldor, one of the few. So, like, his people have been fighting darkness and dark lords since years of the trees. You know?
Literally.
I forget, was Elrond around for any of the kinslayings?
Yes.
He was a refugee of the
that's
last
right.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. That guy's seen some shit.
He has...
Yeah, as a child, had to escape the kinslaying, and then was kidnapped for years.
It's all coming back to me.
Yeah, he's lived some shit. So Luthien also comes up again in Chapter 3, The Ring Goes South. And in this, the narrator mentions that the night before the Fellowship left Rivendell, they heard the full lay of Baron Luthien, which we are not going to do here. It is very long. You should look it up in the Lays of Beleriand.
Yes.
It's beautiful, though.
It's great.
As Aragorn says, it may give you hope.
It may.
Very well may.
It may lift your spirits.
So Luthien also comes up, oddly enough, in Shelob's lair at the end of the Two Towers. The narrator explains that Shelob is like the evil spider form creatures of the First Age that Beren fought on his way to Doriath to meet Luthien.
Yeah, we've got an excerpt from that chapter, Shelob's Lair, read by Danny.
There age long she had dwelt, an evil thing in spider form, even such as once of old had lived in the land of the elves in the west, that is now under the sea. Such as Beren had fought in the mountains of terror in Doriath, and so came to Luthien upon the green sward amid the hemlocks in the moonlight long ago. How Shelob came there, flying from ruin, no tale tells. For out of the dark years, few tales have come.
In the Dark Years, that would have been when Morgoth was taken over?
I think they're talking about the Second Age, right?
Like the end of the First Age, yeah, I think.
yeah,
is what they're
like
talking
immediately after the end of the First Age.
Like
the
anything after the Near-Nath is, I think, what they're talking about, right?
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, history goes pretty dark for a while, especially while the Numenorians are away.
Okay. Let's move on to the next chapter, shall we?
Yeah, so Chapter 9, The Last Debate. So this is in The Return of the King. Legolas describes how noble Aragorn is and says, quote, "For is he not of the children of Luthien?"
Yes, he is.
He sure is.
Luthien also comes up in Many Partings, Chapter 6 of, what is this, Two Towers, right?
The Return of the King.
Or Return of the King, sorry. Arwen states that she will not go with her father to the Havens and leave Middle-earth. She says, quote, "For mine is the choice of Luthien."
Oh, how poetic.
Yeah.
Essentially, she's choosing mortality to stay with her
Mortality.
love,
Just like Luthien did.
just like Luthien did.
Hey, again, like this is just a thing that their bloodline does, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
So that was a lot of Luthien references. Let's jump to another First Age character who is frequently referenced throughout the Lord of the Rings. That's Eärendil.
I have a question about the pronunciation of this.
Eärendil?
Is it Deal or Dill? You think?
Deal.
It is Deal. Eärendil.
Eärendil, yeah.
Okay. Cool name. Like a lot of names. I know I say that a lot, but I just love the names and a lot of the descriptions.
The Star of High Hope, right? He's mentioned 10 times.
10 times throughout the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. First time is twice, actually, in the chapter A Knife in the Dark of the Fellowship of the Ring. The hobbits discuss the Elder Days to distract themselves from the darkness.
Yeah, we've mentioned this a few times now. This is when Aragorn tells them the tale of Tenuviel. And when he tells them that tale, there's a lot of references to the First Age.
Yes.
And it also comes up in many meetings. That's from Book 2. That's the Fellowship. Eärendil's mentioned in Bilbo's song, the song that Frodo hears Bilbo chanting while they're in Rivendell.
Also, Bilbo mentions Eärendil when he explains to Frodo that Aragorn had told him that, quote, "If I had the cheek to make verses about Eärendil in the House of Elrond, it was my affair. I suppose he was right." End quote.
I always love that. Bilbo's got a good sense of humor.
Yeah, he does. We also have another reference to Eärendil at the Council of Elrond. Elrond mentions that his dad was Eärendil, which we read that excerpt for just a few minutes ago.
We did, yep.
He's got an incredible memory.
He does.
Yeah, for being so old.
Holy crap.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to remember all that shit.
You must take those, like, what, ginkgo supplements?
The memory vitamins or
Yeah,
whatever.
memory
I
vitamins.
feel like his brain has to be a black hole for sure, with how dense of the information he's got to
yeah,
remember.
Oh, yeah.
All around the singularity.
Yeah. Another singularity that Trevor has pointed out in the Tolkien universe.
So Eärendil also comes up in the Mirror of Galadriel in the Fellowship. And in this part, the narrator describes the scene as Frodo and Sam follow Galadriel down to the Mirror of Galadriel. Essentially, in this scene, the narrator states that, quote, "Eärendil, the evening star, most beloved of the elves, shone clear above. So bright was it that the figure of the elven lady cast a dim shadow on the ground. Its rays glanced upon a ring about her finger. It glittered like polished gold overlaid with silver light, and a white stone in it twinkled as if the even star had come down to rest upon her hand."
Yeah. Eärendil also comes up in the chapter Farewell to Lorien in the Fellowship of the Ring. When Galadriel presents Frodo with the vial of Galadriel, she says, "In this vial is caught the light of Eärendil's star, set amid the waters of my fountain."
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Joel?
I did, yeah. It sounds like there was some light that was set amid the waters of her fountain.
That's what you got from that?
That's yeah, you know, I'm just...
Because what the correct answer and what everyone else gets from it is that the light is caught in the vial because the Noldor have the technology to capture light in gemstones.
Yeah, they do. They
I don't know,
I mean,
man.
they sure do have that, but
Why
I
does
mean,
everyone think it's the water?
It kind of sounds like the light's reflecting off the water. When you scoop that up, it's capturing the light in the water.
If that were the case, Tolkien would have mentioned it. He
I mean,
literally says right here, in this vial is caught the light of Eärendil's star.
Are you talking about the light that was set amid the waters? Is that the light we're referencing, or are
It's the light
It
that's
says it's caught in the file right there, man.
right, but it's
explicit.
It's in the volume of space inside the vial where the water would be, right?
No, it's not. It's in the glass. Oh my god.
He's claiming
You could fill it with anything. You could fill it with perfume. You could fill it with wine. You could fill it with piss. I don't care.
But then you'd have to have that light shining off the piss, right? And then you'd have the
It'd be
light of-
golden.
the water is at best like a good luck charm that is cool, and it would, she probably put bleach in it so it would amplify the light,
So
I don't
this
know.
is an old beef that me and Danny had. Danny believes that the phial of Galadriel, the light of Eärendil that comes from the phial, he believes the light is contained within the crystal like glass of the phial.
It's
itself.
a work of the Noldor.
Yeah, which they do. They do that.
They do that.
They do that.
Why does everybody think it's in the water?
I just think it's just always been my opinion that that the light was caught in the water of her fountain and she scooped it into the phial, hence why it even is a phial and not just a rock.
No,
And then that sentence right there. In the phial is caught the light of Eärendil's star set amid the waters of my fountain.
Sorry, Danny. I got to side with Joel on this one.
I think you're all wrong. I think it's in the glass vial, and the water is just to like amplify the light.
I guess we'll never know, really.
Yeah, it'll be forever a Tolkien
Outside
mystery.
of that explicit statement right there. But I mean,
See, I read the explicit statement completely explicitly the other way, so I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just
Isn't English
It's a-
fun, guys?
it's a beef that could go on forever.
Okay, well, Eärendil also comes up later on in the story. At the stairs of Cirith Ungol. Sam mentions Eärendil when he talks to Frodo about the story of Beren and Luthien.
And then Eärendil also comes up in the chapter Shelob's Lair when Frodo says, he holds up the phial and he tries to light it up and he says that blessing.
Yeah.
Aya Eärendil Elenion Ankalima.
Yeah, on Kalima. What does that remind you of? Let's do a language lesson.
That sounds actually familiar.
Queen of Numenor
Oh, that's not...
and Kalime, right?
Taran Kalime.
Oh,
That
okay.
means brightest.
Brightest?
Yeah, so her name means one who's brightest.
So hey there, Eärendil,
No, I'm just saying, and Kalima means brightest. So he's saying, "Hail, Eärendil, brightest of stars."
brightest of stars. I was trying to translate it in my head.
Yeah. But and Kalima means bright. So her name means brightest. I realized that when I was reading this earlier.
The narrator does describe the phial of Galadriel lighting up, though. And,
Of course,
yeah.
crystal lights up.
In the Two Towers, Shelob's Lair, it stated, "For a moment it glimmered, faint as a rising star, struggling in heavy earthward mists. And then its power waxed, and hope grew in Frodo's mind. It began to burn and kindled to a silver flame, a minute heart of dazzling light, as though Eärendil himself come down from the high sunset paths with the last Silmaril upon his brow. The darkness receded from it until it seemed to shine in the center of a glove of airy crystal, and the hand that held it sparkled with white fire."
Wow.
I mean, that's
Wow.
regardless of how we think it's lit up, that's a pretty
Right.
darn cool
That's
way
pretty cool.
to describe how it lights.
Yeah.
Sounds beautiful, honestly.
Yeah. So the light of Eärendil is technically what? A Silmaril, right?
Yeah.
That name also comes up, or that word also comes up 8 times in the Lord of the Rings.
Rings. So it first comes up 3 times in the chapter A Knife in the Dark, an event we've already referenced a few times. This is when the hobbits are discussing the Elder Days to distract themselves from the darkness, and Aragorn tells them about the tale of Tenuviel.
Yeah, we're actually going to do a companion piece for this episode where we read this. So look for that in the feed. Hopefully
Yeah.
it'll be with this episode. If not, shortly after.
That particular chapter seems to make a lot of first age references.
It
yes,
does.
it really does.
It's because that chapter contains the entire song of Tenuviel that
Yeah.
Aragorn sings. So there's a buttload of references just
Yeah.
right there.
Yep.
So the Silmarils also come up twice in the chapter Many Meetings. This is another song. The Silmarils come up in Bilbo's song that he's
Mhm.
chanting in Rivendell.
Yeah.
The song that Frodo overhears him chanting.
Yeah. It's also mentioned at the stairs of Cirith Ungol. Sam mentions the Silmaril twice when he talks to Frodo about the story of Beren and Luthien. And we got that Zerpt read by Joel from the Two Towers, Stairs of Cirith Ungol.
But that's a long tale, of course, and goes on past happiness and into grief and beyond it. And the Silmaril went on and came to Eärendil, and why, sir, I never thought of it before. You've got some of the light of it in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales never end?
Yeah, if that's not a first stage tie-in, I don't know what the fuck is right there.
Yeah, he's basically saying that what they're going through is still part of that tale.
Yeah.
I love that it's another time where it's stating like these stories don't end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's, whatever is happening, it's still going on. Like
Goes on
a lot
forever,
of the
man.
stuff never ends.
Mm-hmm.
Never-ending tale. Never-ending story.
Yeah. What a heartbreaking movie.
It really is.
The Silmaril also comes up again in Shelob's lair.
Naturally.
It's mentioned as the narrator describes the lighting of the file of Galadriel.
Yeah, we've read a little excerpt from that scene before you already, so we won't go over it too much more. So another subject that comes up, another place that comes up a few times throughout the Lord of the Rings,
Eldamar.
Eldamar.
And it's mentioned 4 times.
And just for those, just to review, Eldamar is essentially the place where the elves live in Valinor.
Yeah, on the on the continent of Aman itself.
Mhm.
Yeah, not so as opposed to Tol Eressëa,
Mm-hmm.
which is an island just close to.
Yeah, no, this is on the continent of Valinor. These are the people who are living life great, living in Eldamar.
Do you think you could have seen Eldamar from Tol Eressëa?
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're very
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just looking over the sea.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah,
It's
you
so
can see
cool.
Tyrion and all that shit.
Oh, that's right, 'cause
Tol
I-
Eressëa was just kind of like out in the bay.
Right, and
sorta.
it'd be at this time the world was still flat, right?
Not in the Third Age, no.
No, but this is just a mentioning
when
of them,
Eldamar
right?
was a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Eldamar is still a thing into the Third Age, but it was at some points a flat world. Yeah, when it
Yeah, at one
existed.
point, yeah.
Yeah.
At one point, you might have been able to, yeah.
So when the world was rounded, you could no longer probably see then from Tol Eressëa.
You probably still could.
You probably
because Tol
can.
Eressëa
It's
is
pretty
really
damn close.
Oh, so they're that okay.
It's
Yeah.
like right off. Tol Eressëa is just right off the shore from Eldamar.
It's like the
basically.
vacation spot from Valinor.
Yeah, it's kind of like Hong Kong or something, like right off the coast of China. You know.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
So Eldamar comes up 4 times throughout the Lord of the Rings. First time is in, again, the book, or the chapter Many Meetings, when Bilbo chants his song in Rivendell.
Yes, of course. Is also mentioned in Farewell to Lorien when Galadriel sings as the Fellowship leaves Lothlorien.
Yeah, and this is a beautiful song that Galadriel sings, and we've got an excerpt from that chapter, Farewell to Lorien, read by Danny.
In the midst of that vessel sat Celeborn, and behind him stood Galadriel, tall and white. A circlet of golden flowers was in her hair, and in her hand she held a harp, and she sang. Sad and sweet was the sound of her voice in the cool, clear air. I sang of leaves of gold, and leaves of gold there grew. Of wind I sang, a wind there came, and in the branches blew. Beyond the sun, beyond the moon, the foam was on the sea, and by the strand of Ilmarinen there grew a golden tree. Beneath the stars of Evereve and Eldamar it shone, in Eldamar beside the walls of Elven Tirion. There long the golden leaves have grown upon the branching years, while here beyond the sundering seas now fall the elven tears. O Lorien, the winter comes, the bare and leafless day. The leaves are falling in the stream, the river flows away. O Lorien, too long I've dwelt upon hither shore, and in a fading crown have twined the golden Eleanor. But if of ships I now must sing, what ship would come to me? What ship would bear me ever back across so wide a sea?
That does kind of sound like a pretty sad song.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad.
She stayed too long, and now she's not sure she'll ever make it to Valinor. Very sad.
Yeah.
Well, we've got the last time that Eldamar is mentioned in chapter 11, the Palantir.
Mm-hmm.
And Pippin asks incessant questions of Gandalf as they ride to Minas Tirith. And Gandalf tells him about many things, including the Palantir. And we'll go further into detail in that in the Feanor section.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll get a little more into that scene in the Feanor section.
Yes, there's a Feanor section.
Spoiler
you
alert.
guessed it. Yeah.
Spoiler
Feanor. Feanor.
Dun, 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 dun.
We should have a theme song for Feanor.
A Feanorian theme song? Hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into another thing. It was mentioned quite a few times in The Hobbit. So Gondolin is mentioned 3 times in The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it might actually be mentioned more times in The Hobbit than it is.
It is. Yeah, it was 6 times, I believe, in The Hobbit. Right?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. So the first time Gondolin comes up in The Lord of the Rings is naturally the Council of Elrond. So while retelling the history of the Elder Days, this is again when Elrond mentions that his father is Eärendil, who is from Gondolin.
Yeah, in A Journey in the Dark, Gondolin is mentioned when Gimli recites the Song of Durin.
Love that song.
And in the Mirror of Galadriel, Gondolin and Nargothrond are mentioned when Galadriel explains to the Fellowship how old both her and Celeborn are. She's pretty old.
Yeah, she's pretty friggin' old. And we got a Zerpt here from The Mirror of Galadriel, read by Trevor.
Yet not in vain will it prove, maybe, that you came to this land seeking aid, as Gandalf himself plainly purposed. For the Lord of the Galadrim is accounted the wisest of the elves of Middle-earth, and a giver of gifts beyond the power of kings. He has dwelt in the west since the days of dawn, and I have dwelt with him years uncounted. For ere the fall of Nargothrond, or Gondolin, I passed over the mountains, and together through the ages of the world we have fought the long defeat.
I love that. Another really depressing phrase, fought the long defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fruitless victories to long defeat.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's been around for a long... Both her and Celeborn have been around for a long time.
Long time. So let's get right into it. We mentioned it earlier, the Feanor section.
Feanor section, yeah.
Yeah, Feanor is mentioned 3 times in The Lord of the Rings.
So first time comes up in A Journey in the Dark, in the Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf explains, again, the symbols on the doors of Durin to the rest of the Fellowship, and he explains that one of these symbols is, quote, the Star of the House of Feanor. We can, imagine that was put on there by Celebrimbor, being his grandson.
Being his grandson, of course.
And the password for that door was Melon?
Melon.
Melon.
Yeah. Friend. The word.
Elvish word, the...
Sindarin word for friend.
Yeah.
Feanor also comes up when they're talking about the Palantir. Pippin asks a whole shitload of questions to Gandalf as they ride to Minas Tirith. It's Exposition City, that chapter.
I love it, yeah.
Gandalf tells him about many, many, many things, including Feanor.
Gandalf's got some cool knowledge to drop.
Yeah. We got a small Zerpt from the Two Towers, the Palantir by Joel.
The Palantiri came from beyond Westerness, from Eldamar, and the Noldor made them. Feanor himself maybe wrought them in days so long ago that the time cannot be measured in years.
Yeah. So
The Palantir are old.
The Palantir are old, and they're made probably by Feanor. That's so friggin' cool.
They last a very long time, too.
Oh, yeah. Dude, when Wormtongue throws it off of the balcony, it smashes, it bends the railing, and the railing bends and snaps, and it smashes the stair that it lands on, and it's like unscathed.
Okay, so they're also dense as fuck.
Yeah, they're made of some kind of glass that's like hella dense. Yeah.
Well, just in general, it seems like Noldoran craft is insanely durable.
Insanely.
Their weapons, their jewels.
I mean, you think when you live so long, you'd want durable items, right?
Yes, they would need to be.
Could you imagine if they had like our shitty clothes and stuff that wore out in like, a couple years or whatever? They'd be buying new clothes and shit all the time.
Well, okay, so I remember, was it Pippin who picked up the Palantir and
Yeah, correct.
right? Okay, so if just dropping that has enough to bust a railing and break stairs, like, but it's not heavy.
That's what's weird about it.
That thing is loaded with some kind of magic.
Because Pippin
right?
is able to pick it up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Crazy.
Yeah.
The Palantirs kind of scare me, if I'm being honest.
If I'm being honest, they're kind of
Yeah.
spooky.
Yeah.
So let's jump to another subject that comes up only twice. Well, only directly twice. They kind of mentioned the land to the west under seas a lot, but
Yeah.
Beleriand we're talking about.
Of course.
I can't not hear that in the Minturd.
Beleriand.
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 Yeah.
Beleriand.
Yeah, every
Beleriand.
time.
So Beleriand comes up explicitly 2 times throughout The Lord of the Rings. First time being, of course, what else? The Council of Elrond.
Yeah.
So we'll give you an excerpt from the Council of Elrond this time. So Elrond recants his memories of the Elder Days, and he name drops Beleriand. Here's an excerpt from that chapter read by Danny.
I remember well the splendor of their banners, he said. It recalled to me the glory of the elder days, and the hosts of Beleriand. So many great princes and captains were assembled, and yet not so many, nor so fair, as when Thangorodrim was broken, and the elves deemed that evil was ended forever. And it was not so.
The long defeat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, evil seems to persist.
Persist.
It
Fruitless
does.
victories.
And it's patient. I remember this. It's very patient.
Yeah, evil's patient. Balerion comes up again in Shelob's lair. Frodo explains to Sam that the sword's sting was forged in Balerion, where spiders were commonly found in the Mountains of Terror, and that might help them now.
It might be made for this.
Yeah, it might be made for this exact fucking thing. So we got an excerpt from Shelob's lair by Trev.
Come, let us see what Sting can do. It is an elven blade. There were webs of horror in the dark ravines of Beleriand where it was forged. But you must be the guard and hold back the eyes. Here, take the star glass. Do not be afraid. Hold it up and watch.
Yeah.
For the eyes.
Poke him in the eyes. Valinor, famous place as well.
Yeah, that comes up twice.
Yeah, it comes up twice. First in chapter 1 of book 2, Many Meetings, Valinor mentions it in Bilbo's song. Once again, that Bilbo's song mentions a lot of first age
It does,
shit.
yeah, I'm noticing that.
Yeah, his song is basically about the first age, so it's a long song.
Bilbo seems to know a lot more than I feel like you'd expect him to know about the past.
Yeah.
He loves lore.
Yeah, he does.
So-
He would be a Hobbit lore master if there was one, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He lived long enough.
Yeah, it's true.
So Valinor comes up explicitly in many meetings. It also comes up explicitly in many partings in the Return of the King. So in many partings, the narrator briefly describes a scene of King Aragorn and Queen Arwen sitting by the fountain in Minas Tirith and describes Arwen as, quote, singing a song of Valinor.
Yeah, must be beautiful.
It must be beautiful.
My favorite guy of all time from the first age, Turin. He's mentioned twice, believe it or not.
Yeah, Turin even comes up in The Lord of the Rings.
Of course, it's in the Council of Elrond.
Of course.
Where everything comes up.
Everything comes up. And Elrond honors Frodo with a high compliment during the Council of Elrond. And here is a quote from that part.
But it is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another. I do not lay it on you. But if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right. And though all the mighty elf friends of old, Hador and Hurin and Turin, and Beren himself were assembled together, your seat should be among them.
That is some high praise.
The nicest thing I've ever heard.
It's also several first age references and another quote.
Yeah. All in a nutshell right there. We name dropped 4 people.
Yeah.
Hador, the namesake of the House of Hador, Hurin, Turin, and Beren.
Yeah, all great elf friends, all great heroes.
Huge heroes, yeah. So to be compared to those 4 is like one of the biggest compliments I feel like an elf can give you.
That's crazy high praise.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Choices of Master Samwise. The narrator describes the resilience of Shelob during the fight between Sam and Shelob. We got a Zerpt here from Choices of Master Samwise from Joel.
But Shelob was not as dragons are. No softer spot had she save only her eyes. The blade scored her with a dreadful gash, but those hideous folds could not be pierced by any strength of men, not though elf or dwarf should forge the steel, or the hand of Beren or Turin wield it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wild, right?
I didn't actually expect Shelob to be that resilient. That's
She's like a spider demon.
That's like AC of 30. It's like way high.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, the way that Sam ultimately wins the battle is kind of like what you're supposed to do with bears. Use
let
their
them
power.
use their weight against you.
Let them use their weight
Against
your weapon because you don't have that much force. But
fall on my sword.
Exactly, fall on my sword.
Wait, didn't somebody die that way?
Turin, actually.
Turin, yeah.
The guy we're talking about.
Turin committed suicide that way. Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're
Fell
right.
on the sword, yeah.
Sound tactic, I guess.
Boy,
Morgoth is mentioned only one time in The Lord of the Rings.
one time, and this is one of the lines that actually made it into the movie.
Yeah, it's in the extended edition, but not the theatrical.
How is some evil so prominent in Middle Earth only mentioned once?
By name.
name.
I don't know.
Weird, right? So it was in the Mirror of Galadriel, and what the quote is, it's a short one. Quote, "It was a Balrog of Morgoth," said Legolas, "of all elf banes the most deadly, save the one who sits in the dark tower."
Yeah, I'm sure we all remember that scene from the movie where Legolas is like, It was the Balrog of Morgoth. I think then he says, we went needlessly into Moria or whatever, but
Yeah, which he doesn't say.
this is a cool line. Of all the Elfbanes, most deadly, save essentially Sauron.
Yeah. Then we got a bunch of random first stage words here, guys, and they all come up once. And it's in one fucking excerpt.
And guess who it's from?
And guess who it's from? Exposition in a trunk.
In a trunk.
Treebeard.
Treebeard himself. Who do you think would be spewing all sorts of random ass, like old elvish words from the first age? Of course, it's
Yeah.
Treebeard.
And those words are Dorthonian, Assyrian, Neldareth, Nan-Tarsarian, right? Is that how you say that?
I think so.
Tarsarian, Atar Naneldor, Orod Nathan, and Tarimornalome.
Essentially, these are all just fancy elvish names
For
for a
places
bunch of
in the first age.
a bunch of different regions in Beleriand. And we're going to actually have Trevor read off this poem, Treebeard's poem here. So this is from the chapter, Treebeard, from the Two Towers, Book 3, Chapter 4.
In the willow meads of Tassarinan, I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and the smell of the spring in Nan-Tassarian. And I said that it was good. I wandered in the summer in the elm woods of Assyrian. Ah, the light and the music in the summer by the 7 rivers of Osir, and I thought that was best. To the beaches of Neldareth I came in the autumn. Ah, the gold and the red and the sighing of leaves in the autumn in Tower Naneldor. It was more than my desire. To the pine trees upon the highland of Dorthonian I climbed in the winter. Ah, the wind and the whiteness and the black branches of winter upon Orod Nathan. My voices went up and sang in the sky, and now all those lands lie under the wave, and I walk in Ambarona, in Taurimorna, in Aldalome, in my own land, in the country of Fangorn, where the roots are long, and the years lie thicker than the leaves in Tauremornalome.
Jesus Christ, shut the fuck up, right?
That's a lot
oh
of-
my God.
And none of these places, like, exist anymore, right? Like, they got,
Right.
they got
Yeah.
sunk.
They're all sunk.
And they have no frame of reference for what the fuck these places are. Or
yeah, the
anything.
poor
Like,
two hobbits that have to listen to
This
this.
is gobbledygook.
Yeah, that's a word for it. Gobbledygook.
I love that extended scene in the movie where he recites that poem, which I think he still recites in the book too.
Yeah.
But then Frodo or Pip and Merry fall asleep.
Yeah, they just fall asleep in the. Yeah, that's what I would do. It's funny. Me and Joel had a priest back in high school that sounded a lot like Treebeard.
In the name of the
Father
and
and the Son. Yeah, it was bad, you guys. I fell asleep standing up several times like a horse.
Priest Treebeard. Okay.
Yeah, I actually had to move that guy's books one time. Me and my brother. Well, we were altar boys at the church, so we had to do
Back in the day.
We had to
Altar
do
boy.
manual labor. So we actually helped that particular priest move one time. He was moving from like one place to another, and holy fucking shit, that guy had so many books.
Yeah,
I've
he
never.
was a smart guy from what I heard.
He was a learned. He was a book guy for sure. But I swear to God, he had all of his books like upstairs on the second floor, and I thought he was going to collapse the damn house.
the
Like, it was
the floor. Yeah,
It sounds like
it
a
was
fire hazard, if I'm being
crazy.
honest.
yeah.
a lot of books. A lot of books.
A lot of books. It's good to keep books around, though.
Yeah.
Speaking of books, that's all we have for the Lord of the Rings references, the first stage references in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and that's just first age. There's second age references.
Oh yeah, there's actually Years of Trees references.
Mhm.
I cut a couple things out of the outline that were pre-first age. So
Yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll do something like this again in the future for second age stuff. Who knows?
Who knows?
But just to tie things off with a bow, how do we feel about these? I mean, I love these references. I mean, these references throughout the Lord of the Rings are essentially what keep inspiring me to go back and reread the Silmarillion.
Yeah, and we really love how these histories are intertwined with each other.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a work of art.
And also, it's really, really wild to me that there was literally no information on these references until the Silmarillion was published in 1977. So, like, between the Lord of the Rings coming out and Silmarillion coming out was over 20 years of darkness.
Yeah, so you'd
even longer for the Hobbit.
Yeah, so you'd be reading these books and seeing all these cool fucking references, and just like, man, that sounds really cool.
Hope he writes a book about
I wonder
that.
what what that was about. Maybe he'll make a sequel one day. And little did you know, he had already had all these things written out, just waiting for you.
Exactly. Well, guys, I think that's pretty much it for us. Tune in next week. We got it's not like it's kind of like the beginning of a two-parter, but we got the Gollum character profile coming up.
Yeah.
And then followed by a review of the Gollum game.
That's right.
So those kind of go together. But next week will be the Gollum character profile. Week after will be the Gollum game. And we hope you guys enjoy those episodes.
You're going to learn all about Gollum. Stay tuned.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to KOT Podcast, though. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast to stay up to date on new episodes. And please rate us or give us a nice review if you like us. If you don't, just move right along.
And a big thank you, as always, to our patrons. We wouldn't be able to do this without you.
No way.
Subscribe to us on Patreon to help support and get some exclusive content. That's patreon.com/KOT podcast. We also accept private one-time donations. If you would like to go that route, just contact us somehow on whatever platform and we'll work it out. We have PayPal and other services.
And we'd like to ask you to take a minute to follow us on our social media platforms. Definitely check out our Discord. I think that's where we're most active. You can have discussions and stuff with us. There'll be a link in the description for you to check that out.
Yes.
Follow us on TikTok at keep_on_Tolkien_podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a companion piece that just came out about the Faithful Stone.
Yeah. The Trevor read.
That I read for you guys. Check that out.
Check
the
that
Faithful Stone, the story about the Druidane guy, right?
The Druidane guy, yeah. Which
very cool tale.
Yeah. Also check us out on Twitter at KOT Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/official Keep On Tolkien. Check us out on Instagram at Keep On Tolkien Podcast. And lastly, don't forget to check out our merch store. We got a lot of cool stuff on there. We've designed it ourselves. We own it ourselves. It's a lot of really, I love my shafted shirt. I always talk about it.
Yeah.
But the URL for that is keep-on-tolkien-podcast.tmail.com.
Yeah, please check that out. There's cool shit on there, guys.
Go support your podcast and represent.
Yeah, and represent, exactly. You'll be the coolest kid on the block with everyone's going to want to know where you got that obscure t-shirt, so. But that's all for us, guys. I'm Danny J.
And I'm Joel N.
And I'm Trevor D.
And we are
Keep on Tolkien.
Alray and Tuluba. God, it's hot in here.
I'm sweating up a storm.